I am known as Yosef ben Yaakov, or Joseph. I, like my father before me, am a carpenter. The scriptures don't give many details about my family and about me. Our origins are out of Bethlehem, but our hometown is Nazareth in Galilee. I'm listed in the genealogy. In fact, Mary and I are both of the house and the line of David. The custom of our time was to be arranged to be married fairly young. Girls often quite soon after they turned 12, and men most often by the time they were 18. Now, prior to a girl's 12th birthday, plus a day, a girl's father could arrange a marriage that would be binding. After that, the day after she turned 12, she had the right of refusal, and that meant that she could not be forced into a marriage that she did not accept. I was some years older than my bride, and that was often the case. And Mary was older than 12. Our marriage had already been arranged. We were betrothed, pledged to one another. Full marriage was sealed by three things: by an exchange of money or a gift of value, and that was usually a ring, a contract outlining mutual obligations to each other, and then, of course, marital relations. Any one of these three fulfills our law's obligations, but usually all three pieces were in place. Mary had agreed to the union, so it wasn't a forced marriage. I knew Mary's family all my life, and I've known Mary since she was born. Our families, they were delighted and looked forward to our marriage. Usually, there was about a year, sometimes two, between the agreement and the ceremony. This gave time for the groom to save some money and prepare a home, as well as to gather a dowry. Betrothal, or kiddushin, means sanctified or set apart for a specific or sacred purpose. So once a girl and or her father accepts the money or contract offered by the prospective husband, that is a formal betrothal. It sets aside the woman to be the wife of that one particular man only. It's more binding than what you might call engagement. Once that's in place, the girl is legally the wife of the man. This can be changed only by death or by divorce, and they don't live together during this time. Marriage, after the wedding, which we call nisuin, was when mutual obligations begin. The man brings his wife home, and they begin married life together. So we were betrothed. We were bound legally, but it was not a consummated marriage. That is why it was such a shock for her to tell me that she was pregnant. I knew I hadn't been with her, and so it had to be someone else. She told me this tale that sounded like it was straight out of the law and the prophets, about seeing an angel in a vision, and that this would be Yahweh's baby. Really? I couldn't believe it. There hadn't been a hint of anyone else, especially since we had been betrothed. And of course, any fooling around before the wedding was legally adultery. Mary, my Mary, would never take such a risk. I was absolutely stunned and shaken to my core. My sweet young Mary. I could have reported this to the rabbis and to the priests, and the likely result would have been her stoning, but I didn't want that. She betrayed me and her family, but I still loved her. even though I could no longer marry her. So to get a writ of divorce was the only way. There would still be disgrace for her and for her family. And the community's life and purity would be thrust into social and moral turmoil. I went to my house now, and settled in for the night. But do you think sleep came? The situation kept roiling around in my mind, and I kept circling back to the same conclusion. She'd been with someone else, and I had to obtain a divorce. But to do it quietly, to save Mary and her family as much embarrassment as I could. Oh, I was desperately tired. But that blessed thing called sleep eluded me. I would drift off. And then a calf would bawl, or a baby wanting her mother's attention would jolt me awake once again. But there was no deep, restful sleep. Just a little while before dawn, I was kind of half awake, half asleep. I got the start of my life. An angel, or what seemed to be like an angel, appeared to me in my dream. I couldn't believe my eyes. It must have simply been the power of suggestion planted by Mary's tale of her angel's visitation. But it was too real, too vivid for a dream. And then the angel started speaking. Wow. Now, this happened to prophets and priests and kings, not to simple carpenters. But it soon became apparent to me that this was an angel of the Lord. And he said this: Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. What? That name? Yeshua HaMashiach was not invoked lightly. Mary, my Mary, was to be the mother of the Messiah? As special as she was to me, I couldn't envision her in that role. I always thought it would be a more mature woman, devout and faithful, bearing a son, maybe in a fairly miraculous way, something like Hannah and Samuel, or Sarai and Isaac. But Mary, a girl hardly in her teens, even married, a girl that young was not ready for motherhood. But the angel went on. This was to take place, to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they'll call him Emmanuel, God with us. Finally, I was convinced, but this was so surreal. Yahweh had made Mary pregnant, and he, the baby, would be the Son of God? God with us. What would I do? What could I do? Like the angel had said, go ahead with the plan. Marry the girl. Bring her to your home as your wife. Whew. Well, at least I had almost 9 months, more or less, to get used to the idea. I don't know if it was because the issue was resolved and the answer made clear, or if fatigue finally won But I slept soundly for the first time that night. And when I woke up, I'd been given my marching orders. I had to talk with Mary. I had to talk with Mary. So we talked, and Mary was fine with the idea to push the date up. It would save her the embarrassment and awkward questions that would surely come as a pregnant girl before marriage. But her mother and father, what would they say? How could we explain what had happened and why we would cut the betrothal short? Should we even try to explain? Who would believe us? We decided to keep it to ourselves for the time being, to spare her the crude, condemning questions and speculation. It would be best to finalize things quickly. Then, perhaps 1 or 2 months down the line, announce the expected pregnancy. So we were married. The wedding wasn't quite as elaborate as if we had put the remaining months to put all the plans in place. But keep in mind, this is important. I did not lie with her as would have been my right and obligation as her husband. I didn't want to intrude on God's sacred plan. Soon after, Mary went to see her cousin Elizabeth. She had been in seclusion for about 5 or 6 months. Word had come that she was expecting a baby at her age. Later, Mary told me an incredible story about how Elizabeth's baby jumped in an unusual way when Mary approached with this baby already in her belly. Wow. To be honest, I began to hope that things would settle down soon. It was all far too overwhelming. So I continued to work at carpentry. Soon, I would have 3 mouths to feed when I had started thinking it would just be me on my own again. Then, a new decree. There was going to be a census. Romans. Do they not have anything better to do than to mess with the lives of we commoners, especially we as Jews? But looking back, it was Yahweh orchestrating events so that this special baby would be born in the right place at the right time. Bethlehem. So said the prophets. Mary grew larger and larger as we anticipated this unnecessary, in our minds, inconvenient trip. Now, of course, as timing would have it, she was due to give birth sometime during the time we had to be away. We planned extra time for the trip, about 7 to 10 travel days. We couldn't make as good time as normally because Mary could not travel the hard, long days it normally took. We didn't have much, just 1 donkey, and we couldn't both be on it, so she got to ride. But I'll tell you, I can hardly call that riding in style. If you've ever ridden, you know that riding is hard work. Muscles upon muscles ached, and her back, sore already from carrying the unborn child, was often in excruciating pain. We had to stop often, and days ended early. This was my first experience with a pregnant woman, and frankly, I was hoping desperately I wouldn't have to deliver her on the side of the road. Finally, late in the day, we saw the outline of Bethlehem in the distance. She agreed to press on just a little further as we knew we were close. Dusk had fallen, and the growing number of fires began to light the town. Many people were making this trip to all over this region, not just Bethlehem. But Bethlehem was an ancient city, the ancestral home for many, many Jews. Since we'd taken longer to get there, family members' homes were already filled to overflowing with people of all ages, babies to the aged. We'd sent word ahead that we were arriving, and we'd hoped to find a place, even with a distant relative. Nope. Our only hope was to find a place to sleep that wouldn't be too expensive. But inn after inn turned us away. No vacancy. No room. I began to get desperate. Mary needed rest, sooner rather than later. And she was starting to groan more often, more urgently. Finally, one man said that while he had no proper room for us, he had a stable, a hollowed-out cave in the hill behind his home. And it was in disuse, but if we were okay with that, we could stay there. We'd have to put up with the smell and mess, though he did help us clean up to a bearable condition. Oh, rest. It seemed like an eternity since I'd been granted a good night's sleep. You know how it is. You don't sleep well on the road. And the first night in a new place was never restful. Hopefully we'd get some sleep tonight, and perhaps rest even better the next night. But, as the saying goes, so it was that while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. Father. I was a father. Not really me. Yahweh. Mercifully, it wasn't a long delivery, and the innkeeper had put out a call for a midwife, so I was spared the full responsibility as a novice dad. Besides, Mary needed a woman's presence, one who was experienced in this event. And the baby was born. The naming obviously would wait until the 8th day, until the temple in Jerusalem. But we already knew, we'd been told, he was to be called Jeshua, which is translated, salvation is of the Lord God. Now my little family, numbered 3. This was Mary, my Mary, and her baby. Though he wasn't mine in the normal sense, he was mine to provide for, to love, to nurture, to raise, and to teach. And that's how it came to be, that Mary and I were the only ones who knew that I wasn't Jesus' natural father. That illusion would remain until Jesus was 30, when in his public ministry, he would reveal who he really was. I knew he was special. I knew that Yahweh had had his hand on the boy, the man. I wish I'd lived to see it. There were some awkward times. You know how people comment, oh, he looks just like his father. How could I respond to that? All there was for me to say was, yes, he certainly is the very image of his Father. Emmanuel, God with us.